Why is government allowing mass immigration when we are in a housing crisis? What is the economic reasons behind not blocking the mass immigration to ease on housing shortage? Birth rate has been steadily declining since the start of the millennium. Most societies' governments are a pyramid where you need a young base to work and tax. It's not unique to Australia. A lot of Western nations face a similar issue, and are trying different solutions. I.e. France trying to raise pension age to keep people working longer, etc. Look at Japan and South Korea for an example of what the situation could look like if immigration was barely a trickle. It's cheaper to import workers than to grow them from birth. For every $1 a migrant may cost, they contribute $12 to the economy. Mass immigration. 200,000 a year come as permanent migrants. Most are from the UK, South Africa, EU, or India. The rest are temporary workers and international students, most of whom pack up and go to another country after a few years. Lower birth rate due to expensive housing and cost of living. Need to fudge the numbers with immigration to keep the economy going up and up. 2/3 of people in this country have a pecuniary interest in residential property. There are political reasons to keep it topped up. Without mass immigration, Australia would be in recession, and that looks bad on a politician's CV. So sectors of our economy don't collapse. Of course, maybe more people would be having children if they could afford it. How else are all the diploma mills churning out useless degrees going to survive without gov assistance? Companies complaining to the government they can't find cheap skilled workers. Although they omit the cheap part out when they complain. Because we citizens don't have enough BBs. It's now on 1.6 per woman, which is less than replacement. I am a woman who hasn't had any, so I haven't contributed. Sorry about that. It's called the population Ponzi. Society will collapse if we don't import more taxpayers. But won't we need more hospitals and schools, etc. for all these extra people? How will we pay for it? Easy, import more taxpayers hash. I feel like the numbers they publish aren't right either. Canada has been caught out bringing in nearly 1 million people per year since 2020 by tinkering with definitions. They managed to publish a number of about 0.5 million per year for immigration, by putting an employment requirement on the other 0.5 mils residency permits, hence not qualifying them as an immigrant, just a sort of permanent resident. I wonder if the Australian government have been doing this. Because it's Australia's tried and tested method to avoid recession. People keep complaining about lack of skills as a reason for mass immigration. But if the Gov keeps bailing out business with unlimited cheap labor, where is their incentive to do more with less labor, i.e. innovate and grow productivity? Look at Japan. Population in decline forces businesses to invent new technology to offset the decline in available labor, resulting in more of the economic pie for the remaining population. The big banks and retailers demand it. It keeps labor costs down and provides more customers. What's not to like? Face with tears of joy. It's good for the Fed government. The Fed Treasury has the 3 Ps of growth, productivity, participation, and population. Population growth allows the housing Ponzi scheme and increases demand for services. It also allows the government to say stupid shit like we're not in a recession while living standards drop. The cost of these new migrants in terms of housing and infrastructure is then borne by the states. Why is the government allowing a housing crisis when we have so many people, both citizens and immigrants, who need housing? Because we don't have a minister. Depth of population. Depth of immigration is not the same as a depth of population. We get big decisions made on via short-term political ideals writing in the back of a napkin because demographers, urban economists, strategists aren't employed in the depth of immigration because the states have no powerful voice on immigration. So there's a massive disconnect between population, federal housing, predominantly state council. Because they want cheap labor that they can exploit. I bought my house 20 years ago and it costs 5x now what it did then. If cars went up the same in price, the average car would cost $120,000 today. Think of the poor businesses. Where else are they going to find a ready supply of cheap labor to underpay? Because Australia is a Ponzi scheme. Because visas are one of the biggest incomes the government gets. They look everyone that applies for a visa as a cash cow. That's why. Also, investing in housing and having 5 properties as assets is the norm in Australia. I'm sure those same politicians have 10 properties, so if market keep raising they get even more rich. Do you really think they care about housing problems? That only affects people with low or medium income. Not really their problem. To keep house prices soaring because A, they themselves own multiple investment properties. And B, to gain more control on a whole generation via create the problem to here's the cure via going through a mortgage deal, where the government owns 50. This is a government-made crisis by design. Their answer will always end with them gaining more control. To lower wages and raise property prices. Because the government isn't your friend. 'Cause they are corrupt and don't represent the interests of voters. Because even the lowest paid staffer is paid enough to be immune to the effects of the housing crisis. Are we just shit for not allowing or having crap medium-high density housing? I went to Tokyo and went up to the tallest tower, and everywhere around me was either medium or mostly high density. I think Sidmel are in trouble at the moment, and I think 1-3 the Tokyo pop we would be in trouble. We employ a few people digging up dirt and selling it cheap until recent times. We import people to prop up the housing Ponzi we created and to make our GDP look good. We have burned going backwards for 30 years. Demography is destiny. Auguste Comte, 19th century. They knew back then that the population mix defines a country's destiny. The boomers will eventually die off, but before they do they will consume more healthcare and welfare resources than any generation in history. Despite the common belief, politicians aren't stupid. They know the taxpayer base is shrinking at the worst possible time. Without immigration the entire system is at risk. Cheap labor for large businesses, they'll say multiple other reasons, but the truth is they want to still keep paying people the least they can to profit the most from them. Does the housing crisis affect politicians? You could say, yeah, because voters have a say at the ballot box, but all they need is to talk to big game about fixing it and proceed to do nothing. To answer your question, new wage and credit slaves. Used to be able to have a family on one income, now you require 2 incomes to survive. The days of the baby boomers are gone. Because the boomers are about to go into government-funded aged care and they need lots of worker bees paying taxes to fund it. There is no housing shortage, mate. There are millions of houses empty because it's more convenient having them empty for tax purposes. The economic reason is if they can drive down your quality of life you'll work for lower pay with worse conditions. Some might say the goal is to destroy the middle class, but that is simply a side effect of the goal. Stop Airbnb. To keep the housing Ponzi going and GDP to stay positive. Check the latest reports on Aussie's productivity, and then you know why. Because the Gov keeps saying the housing crisis has nothing to do with immigration, yet no housing crisis when borders shut and no active immigration. The Gov is hell-bent on continuing its deal with India regardless of who becomes homeless. To hide what a terrible job they're doing at managing the budget. Need more taxpayers. How else can they keep this bubble going? Government will do whatever it takes to keep this bubble, and their prop investment portfolio, from bursting. It's a pyramid scheme. LOL, because the Australian government are for themselves, not for the citizens of Australia. Everything is going as planned. Why did they ever allow it? That's the real question. Lots of skilled and specialist migration to make up for loss of the same. Lots of boomers straight up retired when the pandemic hit, and we haven't been training educating replacements fast enough. Especially bad in growth industries where migration has been required to fill positions even before the pandemic. Our government has no interest in raising the birth rates and is happy to see people as cultureless, interchangeable units of production and consumption that can be swapped in or out of a country via immigration.